Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it looks like we're going to take a vote on this today. So for me, it's important to put some comments on the record on this matter. We are going to vote on what I consider to be a matter of great public import because it directly affects the health of our residents, and particularly the most vulnerable in our community, pregnant women and children. And so in preparation of today's hearing, I certainly did research on my own to try and find where I land on this position. And I'll tell you, when it first came to my attention, I thought, what is this? This is hokey pokey science. Of course, fluoride in our water is safe. How could it not be? It's been happening since as far as I can recall. And so when I did research and I looked into it, before I talk about the research that I found, and if anyone here that is an expert or professional in the area takes issue with anything that I say, I genuinely and authentically welcome you to come and correct me, because I am not an expert in this area, nor do I in any way pretend to be one. But before I get into it, I do want to commend Commissioner Gonzalez for his leadership in bringing something like this before the board, because since this has gone through your committee by way of the informational session that you had, my office and I individually have received a lot of feedback and response as it pertains to this issue. And it wasn't an issue that ever came on my radar prior to, but apparently a lot of people feel very, very strongly about this. And that has been made very clear to me over the last several weeks. And so I thank Commissioner Gonzalez for his leadership in bringing this before the board to have the important discussion that we are having today. And so here is what I find compelling on the issue. I don't think anyone would argue that fluoridation began in our public drinking supply as early as 1945 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I believe that was the first municipality to add this fluoridation. And since then, it kind of spread like wildfire all throughout the country. What was compelling to me was that in 1945, when this chemical was added to public drinking supply, and it's absolutely accurate that the CDC at that time commended it as the biggest public health breakthrough in a century because of what it did to help with tooth decay and cavity prevention in young people and to the general population. But in 1945, fluoride was not included in toothpaste. It wasn't in the toothpaste. Fluoride wasn't added in toothpaste until 1956. Crest was the first company to introduce fluoride in toothpaste. That was in 1956. And ever since then, fluoride is obviously commonly added, if not in all of our toothpaste. So it made me wonder, what is the actual necessity of this fluoride in our drinking water when subsequent to its introduction, technology has changed, the world has changed, and certainly innovation has allowed for this chemical, its intended stated purpose of which is to prevent tooth decay, has now been added in our toothpaste, not in water or beverages that we consume, but rather that is a topical solution that we put on our teeth but is not intended for us to ingest. And so fluoride is healthy for us to ingest and put on our teeth. I'm not so sure about the levels that are current in our drinking water. And I know it's been done this way for many years, but I certainly am very open to arguments that just because it's been done a certain way for many years is not a reason for us to continue doing it. And so that I found to be somewhat compelling, because I think that the addition of fluoride to toothpaste in 1956 makes a difference. And I know there's a group of people who have been advocating for this for quite some time, but there's a very recent court decision out of the Southern Federal District Court of California. And it's important to note because sadly this has become a partisan issue where lines are drawn based on party lines. And this federal judge out of California, which was a Barack Obama appointee, Judge Edward Chen, found there to be very compelling evidence that current fluoride levels in drinking water was a cause of concern, and directed the Environmental Protection Agency to go back and take a look at this and ruled for the Environmental Protection Agency to do exactly that. And so I'm going to read a couple of quotes from Judge Chen's ruling on September 24th, 2024, which was just a few months ago. It said, while Chen was careful to say that his ruling does not conclude with certainty that fluoridated water is injurious to public health, he said that evidence of its potential risk was now enough to warrant forcing the EPA to take action. Quote, in all, there is substantial and scientifically credible evidence establishing that fluoride poses a human risk to health. It is associated with a reduction in the IQ of children and is hazardous at dosages that are far too close to fluoride levels in drinking water in the United States. Given, again, quote from his order, given the seriousness of reduced IQ and the ample support in the record that the United States population is at risk of experiencing IQ decrements of over 4 IQ points, the severity of the hazard at issue weighs in favor of finding the risk at issue unreasonable, wrote Judge Chen. And in closing, he said, not only is there insufficient margin between the hazard level and those exposure levels for many, the exposure levels exceed the hazard level. And in final, I quote, one thing the EPA cannot do in the face of this court's finding is ignore that risk. Now, when I hear a judge out of the federal court in California enter an order like that, it makes me continue to probe further on what exactly is going on. Clearly, there is some sort of evidentiary support to suggest that we should be taking a look at this. And then I think about the way that we operate as a society. We constantly will hear, this product has been recalled. This product has been recalled. Why is it being recalled? Because there is the potential hazard that it could harm a child. There is the potential hazard that it can cause death or serious injury. Recalls go out all the time, and anytime we hear a product being recalled, as parents, as consumers, as mothers, as fathers, as daughters, as children, we jump to respond to the recall because what we don't want is to expose ourselves or our children to even the potential of a hazardous risk. And so when I ingest and think about all of this information, in addition to the list of countries that have already eliminated fluoride from their drinking water, it makes me wonder whether or not the levels that are currently being disseminated to our community is worth its intended purpose when it began back in the 1940s and in the 1950s, and whether innovation and technology has allowed for those intended public health benefits to be cured in other ways. And so it weighed heavily on me what direction I was going to take on this. And frankly, I think that the mere potential risk to pregnant women and young babies, for me, is cause of great concern. Enough for me to say, listen, if we remove this from our drinking water, we will make a decision that you can challenge the research, and anyone and everyone should challenge the research. But at least this particular judge and Barack Obama appointee found the evidence to be credible enough to say that this risk is high enough for me to have concern in the EPA. You need to come back and give us a response. We are now voting in a similar light and in a similar manner. The options before me are allow the fluoridation to continue, with studies out there saying that this is increasing the risk of lower IQs and cognitive deficiencies in our young population, in our pregnant population, versus cavities and tooth decay, where the actual substance is already in toothpaste, etc. For me, the decision becomes more easy after I look at the data on this, and the actual pouring of the fluoride into our drinking water can resume if the data changes. We can add it back. Once we stop, there's nothing mandating that we stop it forever. But again, the potential health risks that I've seen through the research that I've done, and I would have loved to have presentations of both sides. I would have loved to hear arguments presented before the board today on both sides. But the amount of research that I've done, I'm safely landing in a place of voting in favor of removing the fluoride from our drinking water. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner